12-й раз. Который раз вы уже участвуете? Для вас вообще что означает этот форум?
Спасибо за вопрос. Это уже третий раз, как я присутствую на форуме, и у меня особые отношения с вашей страной. Это связано с Астанским региональным хабом. Грузия является Civil Service Bureau, государственной службы. Бюро является членом этого хаба, и мы каждый год приглашены на эти мероприятия не только в рамках Астанского экономического форума, а другие совместные мероприятия мы тоже проводим в Казахстане, и в Грузии, и в других странах хаба. Так что это мероприятие очень важно, поскольку как тема сегодняшней конференции – это мотивация государственных служащих. И мотиваторы, мы будем говорить о мотиваторах, которые есть в Грузии для госслужащих, и будем слушать других стран тоже. Это очень важно для того, чтобы делать совместную реформу государственной службы и модернизировать наши страны.
Скажите, пожалуйста, чтобы мотивировать госслужащих, что вы, ваша страна в Грузии, какие меры вы предпринимаете, что вы проводите, может, какие-то там мероприятия, не знаю?
Есть, что я сегодня буду отмечать, это те мотиваторы, которые уже есть в законе Грузии государственной службы, и те мотиваторы, которые будут включены в будущем. Я, например, могу сказать о бонус-системе немножко, которая является очень важным мотиватором для грузинских госслужащих, и эта бонус-система новая для Грузии. Я буду подробно рассказывать об этом в моем докладе.
Все-таки это экономический форум. Как вы оцениваете экономику Казахстана?
Это я не могу сейчас сказать, потому что это не моя сфера.
Тогда расскажите про вашу сферу, про грузинскую, не знаю, про ваших госслужащих. Только какие еще вы темы будете поднимать, помимо мотивации госслужащих?
Буду поднимать тему не только мотивации, еще реформирования и те челленджи, которые на русском как челленджи будут, извините.
Говорите челлендж,
вызовы, да, которые есть в наших стран, и в Грузии, и в Казахстане, и всех постсоциалистических стран, госслужащих. Это очень такая тема, новая тема, какие инновационные методы управления мы можем внедрять вместе.
Все, спасибо, большое спасибо. У вас хороший русский.
Let me now invite our four distinguished and honorable speakers onto the stage and ask them to take their seats. Ms. Mirjana Spolaric-Egger, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, Assistant Administrator of the United Nations Development Programme, Director of the UNDP Bureau for Europe and the CIS. Mr. Shigeru Katsu, President of the Nazarbayev University. We have small changes in our agenda, and unfortunately, Chairman of the Agency of the Republic of Kazakhstan for Civil Service and Anti-Corruption, Mr. Shpekbaev, is not able to join us today, and we have Ms. Aygul Shaimova, Deputy Chairperson of the Agency of the Republic of Kazakhstan for Civil Service Affairs and Anti-Corruption, and Mr. Alihan Baymenov, Chairman of the Steering Committee of the Astana Civil Service Hub. Please give a warm welcome to our esteemed colleagues for coming and joining us today. Your speech from the place. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Baymenov. Mr. Chairman, please.
Қайырлы күн, құрметті ханымдар мен мырзалар, қонақтар, достар. Астана экономикалық форум аясында 6-шы рет өткізіліп отырған арнайы сессиямызға қош келдіңіздер. Қазіргі замандағы адамзаттың ортақ өзекті мәселелерін шешуде мемлекеттік басқару сапасының орны ерекше. Ол өз кезегінде мемлекеттік қызметшілердің білімі, білігі, сонымен қатар ынтасымен анықталады. Олардың жеке бастың қамын емес, мемлекеттің, қоғамның ортақ мәселелерін шешуге бейім болуы, елге қызмет жасауға ниеті ел дамуында маңызды рөл атқарады. Осыны түсінгендіктен де, осыдан 100 жыл бұрын Алашорда үкіметінің басшысы Әлихан Бөкейханов ұлтқа қызмет мінезден деген еді. Бүгінгі сессиямыз осы өзекті мәселелерге арналады. Distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the complex challenges of VUCA world, disruptive technologies and rising expectations of citizens place new demands on the quality of public administration, a fact that is recognized in the SDGs. Increasingly, extensive development of information technologies, social networking and social media enable citizens to compare and assess the performance of their governments against certain benchmarks. This is resulting in a quasi-competitive environment in which government agencies have to constantly improve their performance. In this context, civil servants should possess the required competences to effectively respond to these increased expectations. However, the overall quality of civil service also depends on such other factors as the level of motivation of public servants, as well as their moral and commitment to their jobs. A lot of attention is paid to these factors nowadays, or to what is often referred as the new public passion. Thus, this is the reason we all gathered here today to talk about reward and recognition in the public service. It seems that these factors have been a subject of discussion for many centuries to date. For instance, our ancestor and great thinker Al-Farabi highlighted 11 centuries ago 12 character traits that a public servant should possess. Among those, he mentioned honesty and commitment to public service as core values necessary for high performance. About the same time, Yusuf Balasaguni, our famous philosopher from Central Asia, outlined professional skills civil servants should possess for 15 public positions. Among those, he paid special tribute to dignity and motivation. More recently, public service motivation, or PSM, has become one of the key areas of public administration theory. In this connection, we are honored to have James Perry as a keynote speaker today, the person who coined the term public service motivation. Using this opportunity, let me express my sincere gratitude to Professor Perry for accepting our invitation. I believe that Professor Perry's valuable theoretical insights combined with practical experience of hubs participating countries will greatly contribute to designing effective motivation and reward systems. At this point, it's worth noting that this is a uniqueness of the hub that is bringing academics and practitioners together in devising and proposing policies and practices that are pertinent to public service development. Recognizing the importance of motivation for attaining public service excellence, the subject seems to be on the agenda of many governments in the region and beyond. To this end, the Astana Civil Service Hub is also focusing on motivation and other factors that are conducive to enhancing the performance of public servants. For example, first, the hub, together with Singapore Public Service Excellence Center, completed in 2018 a study on the motivation of civil servants in Kazakhstan and Pakistan. Second, it has supported the government of Kazakhstan in the development of a new pay system through the implementation of one of its largest development projects in past 5 years. And third, the hub has just completed a draft version of a comparative review of public sector compensation systems, as a compensation is also considered a factor in motivating public servants. Preliminary results of this study will be presented today. Dear colleagues, the Astana Civil Service Hub, a joint initiative of the Government of Kazakhstan and the UNDP, has a mission to assist the governments of its 41 participating countries in civil service development. Since its inception, the Hub is fortunate to enjoy the continuous support of the UNDP Country Office and the Regional Bureau for Europe and Central Asia. For this, allow me to express my appreciation to Ms. Mirjana Stoljaric-Egger and to welcome her in her first visit to Kazakhstan. In implementing its mission, the Astana Hub works through three main pillars: partnerships and networking, peer-to-peer learning and capacity building, and joint research and knowledge sharing. The Hub's agenda is flexible and demand-driven, given that public sector change is constant nowadays. In this connection, the Hub regularly conducts needs assessment surveys and consults with its advisory board to identify priority topics for bringing more value to its participating countries. One such priority is designing effective motivation and reward systems that includes decent assessment policies and remuneration framework. Another priority is to assist public policy schools in the region in enhancing their capacities. A key partner in this is the Graduate School of Public Policy of Nazarbayev University. And using this opportunity, I would like to say special thanks to the President of Nazarbayev University, Mr. Shigeo Katsu, for his collaboration and support. The Astana Civil Service Hub also works closely with a key government partner, the Agency for Civil Service Affairs and Anti-Corruption, that's responsible for civil service development in Kazakhstan. In this regard, we are pleased to welcome and express our appreciation to Mr. Alek Shpekbayev, Chairman of the agency, Deputy Chairman Aygul Shaimova, for their continuous support and cooperation. Distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by saying that there is a direct relationship between the effectiveness of an organization and the motivation of its workforce. I hope that today's session will allow us to better understand and enhance our awareness on how to motivate civil servants through various schemes of recognition and rewards and design novel solutions for our countries. Allow me to wish for a productive session and fruitful work. Thank you very much. Rahmet.
Thank you.
Mr. Boimanov and dear Chairman, dear President Katsu, and dear colleagues, I'm very honored to join you this afternoon in this very important discussion that is based on our partnership with the Civil Service Hub and the university, the Nazarbayev University in Nur-Sultan. I'm also delighted to have the opportunity to hear experts as much as I can, and I will read my statement quickly so that I can hear my following speakers before I have to move on to the next meeting, because this is a really important topic and one that is very dear to me personally, but one that is very close to the core of what UNDP does in this region. Millions of people in the region depend on the capacity of public services to anticipate their needs and to deliver quality services. And we've heard Madame Lagarde yesterday, if these services are not of quality, then the institutions are perceived as weak, and then trust in government entities fails to happen. So we are here to discuss the fundamental question of how we can motivate civil service staff and empower government officials to achieve positive results to the service of their population. And in answering this question, we shouldn't be talking about one-size-fits-all models, but to look at the cultural, institutional, and organizational factors that are relevant in a specific context. But generally, based on our own experience, UNDP internally, we can say that high-performing teams, institutions, and pattern in organizations, that in large organizations and institutions, certain patterns are discernible. Performance is highest in diverse and inclusive organizations where equality is respected and actively pursued, and when the twin threats of discrimination and corruption are quashed. So indicators of high performance appear when an atmosphere of trust and mutual respect is created, when meritocracy is respected, and when calculated risk-taking is encouraged, and when adequate space is created for innovation, and when failure and mistakes are not punished, but used as learning opportunities for new ventures. Another important and less tangible factor that lies at the heart of public service is purpose. We need to know who we serve, and we need to know why we serve. So public service can be rewarded by financial incentives. However, UNDP research has shown that non-monetary incentive systems appear to contribute more sustainably and more effectively to enhancing public sector and civil service performance. So we hope that there will be room during this event to discuss your experience and to learn from your lessons on this subject. And even though I myself will not be sitting in the room, my colleagues will, and who will be very happy to take it forward. Dear colleagues, leadership is critical to ensure high levels of civil service performance, because however motivated the people are who work in an organization, they also need the resources and the tools and the trust in them to implement their tasks. So we partner with governments around the world to strengthen their institutions, and we do so, as I said before, based on our own internal experience, because UNDP works in 170 countries with 17,000 employees. So we combine what we do in the country with the government to what we do internally with our own staff. So also in Kazakhstan, we work in very critical areas of public service delivery and public reforms to ensure that the state apparatus is professional, free of corruption, and according to OECD standards. And we are currently undergoing ourselves the deepest reform that UNDP has ever gone through. And this is again the reason why we are so particularly interested in hearing your experiences and advice. But for us, it is clear that we have to focus on a people strategy that is comprehensive, that is understandable for everybody, that makes sense for all staff, and that creates transparent and acceptable development opportunities for all staff going forward. So we are just at the beginning of implementing this new people strategy, and we will let you know how it goes, but this will certainly have an impact on how we advise governments going forward. So with this, I wish you a very successful event, constructive discussions, and again, many thanks for having me here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mirjana Spolaric-Egger. Now, please let me kindly give the floor to Mr. Katsu.
Good afternoon. I am painfully aware that I have to entertain you just after probably a very nice lunch. And it always comes with the risk that people's mind may be occupied otherwise, and that the motivational factor and even the reward factor of sitting here and listening might be a little bit low. So let me share with you some of my own internal musings that I've picked up after listening attentively to all the presentations yesterday in the very interesting opening sessions. and obviously the implications for the topic that we are going to discuss. And what I found very interesting yesterday, and actually even the person who said it was himself quite surprised, Paul Romer, he of the University of Chicago, admitted that actually a minimalist government would not cut it. He acknowledged that in today's world, not just only today's, but all through times, there are certain functions that only public monopoly can actually exercise in terms of building rule of law, building the trust of people, and importantly, exercise those privileges. And for that, you cannot have too little a government or public sector, and you cannot have too big a public sector, no? And it sort of starts to point us already in the direction of what it takes to build such a good performing public sector. Then we heard yesterday also, obviously, two presentations, one by the President Armen Sargsyan of Armenia, and the Prime Minister of Georgia. And what I found very interesting is that both mentioned that actually in the course of their career, they used to be civil servants at a certain point. Now, I think it's a great motivational factor, maybe also high reward for any civil servant if they know that there are some role models who have even risen to the positions of presidents and prime ministers of their country. However, we all know that those chances are, for most civil servants, rather small. So it's nice aspirational, but to pull us all back to the ground, I think we need to think about some other motivational devices. But interestingly enough, then we had two presentations from the business side, if you recall. German Gref, as well as the chairman of Nokia, Simala. And what they basically pointed out was, number one, in today's world, change is constant. Change is constant, and therefore, any entity, they were talking more from the business side, certainly, they will have to constantly think about transforming themselves and reinventing themselves. Now, in a way, this ought to apply to public service as well, because public service cannot be isolated from the rest, neither of society nor of the economy. But it's intrinsically much more difficult for public service to constantly reinvent itself and transform itself, simply because the metrics on how do you measure performance are quite different from the bottom line that we see in the private sector. Miriana already referred to Madame Lagarde's point on a performing public sector, but importantly also we heard President Nazarbayev talk about the primordial importance of establishing trust, so that the citizen and the leadership can understand each other. And that comes through consistent conduct, showing role modeling, showing the values, living the values, and being able to guide the aspirations and then fulfilling the aspirations of citizenship. Now, all of these point to indeed the challenge of, in today's more complex VUCA world that Chairman Baimenov mentioned, on how do we motivate but also reward civil servants. And the challenges, in my view, are further increased also because, let's face it, with all due respect to my esteemed Dean of the Graduate School of Public Policy, Venkat, and his team, and some of his colleagues are here, And indeed, when Mr. Baimenov said, thank you very much, Nazarbayev University, it was not towards me, it's actually towards Venkat, because he and his team are really doing the work for this academy. But the thing is that we are today trying to nurture, develop, educate future leaders and future leaders in this public service, public sector, civil service, that are probably the first digital generation. For them, doing everything through the smartphone is second nature. Probably you all, I think the audience here, can identify with it. Yet, you know, when you have professors of my age group and others, you sort of wonder, can we actually really relate to each other properly? And what does it take to really motivate a totally new generation that has totally different life experiences than our generation? And that adds to a lot of the challenges. So I would be quite curious if in some of the discussions today, this generational aspect and the disruptive nature or transformational nature of technology will also come up. The other part is that, challenge is that, as we heard, let's say 2040, 2050, Kazakhstan aspires to be part of the top 30 nations. Everybody understands that making money is not enough. What really counts is the welfare and well-being of the population. We also heard that by 2050, basically 4/5 of GDP will be produced in urban agglomerations, and most of both productivity, creativity, but also some of the drawbacks of big agglomerations will all be concentrated in cities. And that means that urban management and urban management leadership is going to take an increasingly proportionately and more important role even compared with central government activities. It means it has huge implications as to the quality, the ability, the enabling environment that are also needed to attract top talent into local government as much as it is a challenge to attract them to central government. And, we know that big cities have drawing powers, but unless they're properly managed, the negative externalities will start to outweigh the positive ones. So there are all these challenges that and I'm sure you will probably add more and others to this, that I see when I look forward in terms of how to motivate civil servants in this age. And to me, in a way, to find a partial response at least to it, start to think in terms of, are we still correct in drawing a distinction between serving in the public sector versus serving in the private sector? Some of the motivations probably ought to be relatively similar. The risk-reward elements ought to probably converge. And if there's maybe slight difference, it may be because of the moral commitment. On one side, you can rationalize with the bottom line, and presumably serving in the public sector, you have sort of higher moral aspirations maybe, and trying to do good intrinsically. But yet, unless we find a convergence on how we manage both sides, we will not probably do justice to neither the motivational part nor the reward elements for future generations of the civil service. Just to take a leaf out of, referring a little bit to my own institution, that is why we often talk about having our public policy school, being very closely also engaged with our business school side. And both of them serving almost as a hub for all the other graduate schools and their respective more deeper, vertical discipline in a way pursuit, knowledge pursuit. In a way, a future civil servant has to understand how business works, what motivates them, in order to be able to provide good services. The private sector better understand how public sector works and what motivates them in order to get their pet ideas through. But overall, it is in the end the citizen who has to judge and has to be satisfied that indeed the public sector and importantly also the private sector are there to help them and serve everybody in the interest of national as well as regional global development. And some of the key, obviously, key concerns of and challenges of today, we've also amply heard them throughout the forum: climate change issues, inequality issues, and others which are transcendent of national, regional boundaries. And any risk, reward, motivation of civil servants, I do hope, are going to find cyclic income elements also by addressing some of the most seemingly complex and difficult challenges of our lifetime for future generations' sake. So I rather pontificated maybe more in terms of the challenges that I see. I have only hinted at what I think are some of the possible ways forward. But as we know, evidence-based policy is what counts. So hopefully, the discussions will also touch upon those key elements that what are needed in terms of establishing a good conceptual framework that will stand the test of time. So thank you very much, and I look forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Katsu. Due to the very important and high-level meeting with the government of the Republic, Polaric Eger have to leave us, so let us thank you very much for participation and valuable speech. To give the next floor to Ms. Shaimova.
В порядок нынешней сессии и буду говорить на русском языке. В первую очередь, конечно, хочу поблагодарить программу развития ООН, региональный хаб в сфере государственной службы, а также Высшую школу государственной политики за организацию этой сессии. Для нас, как для представителей уполномоченного органа, вообще возможность обсуждения в течение этих 2 дней на площадке форума таких актуальных вопросов, наверное, бесценна, поскольку мы для себя получаем очень огромный опыт и, в принципе, находим ответы на решение многих вопросов. Буквально сейчас, в первой половине дня, мы обсуждали вопросы трансформационного лидерства, сейчас мы обсуждаем вопросы мотивации государственных служащих, но как первые 2 предыдущих спикера отметили, эти 2 вопроса очень тесно связаны, поскольку без эффективности, без трансформационных лидеров и без мотивирующих стимулов не будет, наверное, никаких, так скажем, изменений на государственной службе, в частности. Поэтому вот буквально госпожа Эгер затронула вопросы эффективности во взаимосвязи, как раз-таки лидерства, в том, что без доверия, без права на ошибку у служащих не будет продвижек. Об этом же и господин Шигеокаца отметил. И все это стало предметом обсуждения на панельной сессии в первой половине дня. Если говорить же через призму мотивации и эффективности, мне хотелось бы тоже остановиться на определенных вещах. Но в первую очередь, наверное, надо сказать, вот все-таки мы все знаем, что глобализация, мир меняется стремительно, и в этих условиях мы должны успевать за всеми трендами, которые происходят в повседневной жизни. Конечно, становится актуальным и важным не только правильно подбирать нужные кадры, но еще и удерживать их на государственной службе. По крайней мере, для государственной службы Казахстана, но я думаю, это и везде существует такие вопросы, набравшись опыта, накопив его, особенно в узкоотраслевых министерствах, они уходят в частный сектор. Почему? Потому что не всегда соцпакет, который присутствует на государственной службе, отвечает тем условиям, которые предоставляет корпоративный сектор. И поэтому сейчас задача, которая стоит перед топ-менеджерами как государственного, так и негосударственного сектора, это разработать гибкую систему мотивации. Она должна быть, не как, наверное, разовое изобретение, а это должна быть целый результат эволюции на протяжении определенного периода. Сложился такой стереотип, и это вообще практика, когда мы выбираем профессию, мы в первую очередь ориентируемся на то, престижна она или нет. А затем следующий фактор, но никогда мы не задумываемся, а сможем ли мы справиться с этой работой. И если посмотреть исследования, многие также в качестве одного из элементов выбора профессии рассматривали заработную плату. Но многие исследования сейчас опровергают эту теорию, поскольку по данным социологических исследований, по мнению респондентов, только 12% респондентов выбор профессии зависит от оклада. Больше всего сейчас люди ориентируются на то, на первый план выходят, вернее, учитываются ли их заслуги на государственной службе, в организациях, а также заботятся ли вообще о сотрудниках в этой организации. Это также подтверждают и наши опросы, которые мы проводим на ежегодной основе. Для человека сейчас важно чувствовать, что он вовлечен в работу, что с его мнением считаются и что он может как-то повлиять на изменения происходящие. Ориентируясь на это, с 2016 года в Казахстане происходят масштабные реформы в сфере государственной службы. И я, наверное, как представитель уполномоченного органа больше остановлюсь на практических инструментах, которые существуют у нас сегодня. Первое, начну с того, что мы внедрили карьерную модель государственной службы. Об этом я вкратце утром говорила, но тем не менее повторюсь еще раз, что это нам дало. У нас в 3 раза больше людей переместились с нижестоящих на вышестоящие позиции. То есть люди сейчас растут внутри организаций. Второе, на что хотелось бы обратить внимание, мы активно работаем над изменением организационной культуры на государственной службе. И как раз-таки приоритет – это выстраивание взаимоотношений между руководством и подчиненными на основе доверия. Помимо этого, мы работаем над тем, чтобы избавиться от излишней отчетности. Если говорить, например, в цифрах, задумайтесь, например, у нас существует на сегодняшний день 1200 отчетов. Они все шли из года в год, и никто не пересматривал их актуальность. И вот сейчас агентством в том числе проводится большая работа для того, чтобы избавляться от этой рутины. Также проходит работа большая по оптимизации бизнес-процессов. В том числе мы поставили вопрос о необходимости централизации служб управления персоналом, юридических служб, а также бухгалтерских служб. Остановлюсь, наверное, на том, что ближе мне, это автоматизация кадрового делопроизводства. Мы автоматизировали с прошлого года, этот проект активно реализуется. Что на выходе мы получили? Производительность труда повысилась в 14 раз. То есть если раньше приказы мы издавали на бумаге, бегали их, согласовывали, затрачивали на это уйму времени, сейчас это все происходит в автоматизированном режиме. Мы запустили соответствующую систему Еказмет, и в рамках которой за буквально 6 минут издается приказ. Если у нас раньше этой работой занималось 28 человек, сейчас ей занимается 3 человека. Цифры, наверное, говорят сами за себя. Следующее, над чем мы работаем. Мы говорили, что для человека важно, чтобы его признавали. Мы признаем его заслуги и не просто хвалим, мы признаем его заслуги публично. В этом аспекте мы запустили, уже 3-й год проводим конкурс «Лучший государственный служащий». Если в первый год люди относились с неверием к этому конкурсу, то уже по истечении 3 лет, я могу с уверенностью сказать, из года в год этот конкурс набирает свою популярность, поскольку количество участников в разы увеличивается. И буквально сейчас мы объявили этапы отбора. Опять-таки в этом году, 23 июня, мы будем чествовать самых лучших государственных служащих. Так что вы еще успеваете, коллеги, кто присутствует и представляет казахстанскую государственную службу, поучаствовать в этом конкурсе. Помимо этого внедрена ведомственная награда «Лучший государственный служащий страны». Она существует 5 лет, и за эти годы более 900 служащих награждены ею. Конечно же, я уже говорила, что каждый служащий должен чувствовать, что он вовлечен, что он востребован. Поэтому важный аспект, чему мы уделяем внимание, это обеспечиваем максимальную вовлеченность служащих в процессы. Здесь уникальным решением стало, буквально недавно мы внедрили у нас на базе Академии государственного управления, это наша организация, так называемую площадку для обмена мнениями, пространство для мозговых штурмов, фабрика идей, мы ее так в простонародье называем. Что уникально в этой площадке? Уникально то, что она объединила первых руководителей и исполнителей в одном пространстве, где мы открыто, без стеснения обсуждаем все вопросы. И причем оно происходит на равных условиях. Как исполнитель, так и руководитель могут высказать свое мнение. Уже за это время у нас есть быстрые победы, мы решили определенные вопросы. И в конце концов авторы этих идей, чьи, так скажем, идеи уже прошли и внедрены в жизнь, их это побуждает к выдвижению все новых идей. Пятое, над чем мы работаем и на чем хотелось бы остановиться, мы успешно апробируем мировые практики. Конечно, очень много на эту тему дискутируют, и хотелось бы сказать, что, конечно, слепое копирование результата не дает. Мы их внедряем с учетом своих национальных особенностей. И здесь хотелось бы сказать, что мы работаем казахстанской государственной службе, по крайней мере, вот, были до недавнего времени присущи такие вопросы, как переработки. Сегодня, благодаря усилиям агентства, мы их искоренили на 91%. И что мы получили в конце концов? Сейчас сбалансирована личная жизнь и государственных служащих, а также создаются условия для их дополнительного профессионального развития. Даже получаем благодарности от семей наших государственных служащих за эти нововведения. Если говорить в частности об агентстве, сейчас в рамках пилота мы апробируем новую систему. Рабочий день мы начинаем в 18:30 и домой отпускаем наших служащих в 17:30. То есть в 5:30 уже наши сотрудники идут домой. В 5:30, извиняюсь, в 17:30. Также, конечно, у нас вводится опыт открытые пространства, так называемый open space, что приближает, тоже работает на приближение между руководством и нашими сотрудниками. Мы внедрили практику так называемых casual Friday, то есть по пятницам ходим в свободной форме. Это тоже такой уникальный опыт, который создает определенную атмосферу. Если говорить о мерах материальных, вот мы сказали, что меры материальные уходят на второй план. И материальные меры стимулирующие, они также присутствуют. Есть базовый социальный пакет, он включает в себя пенсионное обеспечение, начисление надбавок за выслугу лет, медицинское обеспечение. Ну и, конечно, для каждого из нас, по крайней мере у нас это актуально, предоставляются в приоритетном порядке места в детских садах для детей и государственных служащих. Наши служащие обеспечиваются жильем, причем они идут по 2 программам обеспечения соответствующие. Это предоставление арендного жилья, либо льготного ипотечного кредитования. Существуют соответствующие программы. И новое, что у нас нового, это мы уже говорили, что наше агентство пилотирует новую систему оплаты труда. Ее основное отличие, вот всегда мы говорили о том, что все мы работаем вроде по-разному, а получаем одинаковую заработную плату. Сейчас мы работаем над тем, чтобы уйти от этой практики, от так называемой уравниловки, и будем оплачивать формировать оклад в зависимости от того, как должность служащего влияет на результативность госоргана. В принципе, пилот длится уже 1,5 года, и мы определенные результаты имеем. Как мы видим, во-первых, повышается привлекательность государственной службы. Сейчас желающих поступить в пилотные госорганы, а их 6, возросла в десятки раз. Вот сейчас акимат Мангистауской области, который априори никогда не был, так скажем, привлекательным, потому что это область, где нефтяной сектор очень развит и заработные платы, соответственно, очень высокие. На государственной службе отличались в разы. На конкурс на государственную службу приходит 28 человек. А раньше даже бывали конкурсы, которые не состоялись из-за того, что кандидатов, претендентов не было. Но это тоже, наверное, о многом говорит. Буду завершать в силу ограниченности времени. Это тот пакет мер мотивационных, который существует на государственной службе Казахстана. Если говорить в целом, то рецепт стимулирования служащих у каждой организации свой, а арсенал средств разнообразен. Поэтому я думаю, что сегодняшняя наша площадка позволит нам выработать каждому из нас, подчеркнуть что-то новое и внедрить новые инструменты. Спасибо.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shaimova. Dear honorable speakers, we are grateful to all of you for opening remarks. We invite you to take your seats in the middle of the hall. Please let me proceed to our first session. Today we will have interesting presentations from distinguished speakers. A special feature of the panel is a combination of academic views and practical knowledge devoted to motivation of public servants. Thereby, our session is divided in two parts, first of which is on global trends and contemporary research, and the second one is on the case studies of the participating countries of the ACSH. After each part, we will have a session dedicated to questions and discussions. Thereby, there will be an opportunity to ask your questions and share your opinions, views, and comments. Now, I would like to invite our next speakers onto the stage and ask them to take their seats. Mr. James Lee Perry, Distinguished Professor Emeritus of the Paul O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs of the Indiana University, Bloomington, United States of America. Ms. Gulmira Raisova, Chairperson of the Coordination Council of the Association of Human Resources Managers of Kazakhstan. Mr. Bhaskaran Nair, Adjunct Associate Professor, Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy of the National University of Singapore, Visiting Professor of the Graduate School of Public Policy of the Nazarbayev University, and Mr. Panas Liverakas, Technical Advisor for ACSH and the United Nations Development Program in Kazakhstan. Please, will you join me, yes, in a round of applause for the speakers. And now, I have the honor to give the floor to our keynote speaker, distinguished Professor Mr. James Perry.
I can stand in front of this guy over here because he's not going to be shielded from the audience. Let me ask, how many of you got the memo today about the Casual Friday? Okay, so no, we haven't gotten there yet because I was looking around. I didn't see a lot of people prepared for Casual Friday today, but I'm glad you're here anyway. My presentation today is on civil service system design and performance, aligning institutions, individuals, and incentives, and I'm going to try to get through that in about 20 minutes. I started this research in 1990, so we're encapsulating 30 years worth of work into 20 minutes, but I will try not to run over, since I know you would like to have issue some questions. Let me sort of also comment. I looked at the title. I've been working on this for like 2 months. Now, it may not show it, but I've been working on it for 2 months. And Diana Sharapova from the UND, from the Civil Service Hub, kept sending me messages like, send us your speech, send us your PowerPoints. And so I sort of put this stuff together maybe earlier than I would have expected. And I've gone back to it and I've redone a few things. But as I was sort of preparing for the presentation, one question came to me, and that is, what is my key message? What's my sort of bottom line message? And I was watching a piece the other day on CNN about the 50 top disruptors. And I think some of our opening plenary speakers also referred yesterday to disruption. And I'm doing a book for the Volcker Alliance in the US where disruption is a sort of a key component. We get into blockchain and AI and all that stuff that I know absolutely nothing about. But it occurred to me that what I'm talking about is really sort of a generational, more than a generational transformation of civil service systems. That is part of the idea, and Chairman Baimanoff referred to the new public passion that both the Civil Service Hub as well as the Global Center for Public Service Excellence in Singapore, when it was in business with UNDP, discovered. And that sort of surprised me, because we had essentially 40 developing countries gravitate to the research that I sort of took for granted and thought more about in terms of developed countries than developing countries. So part of what I'm sort of talking about, and it may not be obvious from what I say, is disruption. That is, and what I've come to this partly because, as the intro indicated, I'm Distinguished Professor Emeritus. For those of you that need a translation on that, that means retired. But you know, I've been working in this area. I got my PhD in '74, and I've been working on issues related to motivation since the mid-1970s. So after 45 years, I'm sort of trying to think, what is it that I sort of can bring to this as my final message, my swan song? And I am working on a book. I wish I had the book done. That's trying to translate the research into practice. That is, how would we redesign our civil service systems if we took seriously all the research that's been done over the last 30 plus years on the concepts that I'm going to be talking about this afternoon. Okay, so enough intro. I've already killed about 5 minutes, but it's about disruption. And believe me, next Friday I want to see you all in shorts and casual wear. Okay, so here's what I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to try to do this very quickly because I only have about 15 minutes. First of all, I'm going to talk about three other-oriented motivation constructs. They're really at the core of what I call, or what Chairman Baimanoff calls, the new public passion. And I think that's sort of critically important. That if we're disrupting the system as it has existed since I entered graduate school in 1970, we're moving in a much different direction that's based on these other-oriented motivation constructs. The second thing I want to talk about, and this is something I believe in strongly, and I want to share it with you, maybe to bring you along with me, and that is that I think the research on public service motivation, and I'm going to define that more broadly in a moment, is the foundation for reform. We have lots of evidence. The President Katsu referred to the evidence-based, I think you referred to, somebody did, to evidence-based, and that's certainly an important component of my argument here. The third thing I want to talk about is aligning institutions, individuals, and incentives. Now, during my research career, I've come face to face with some misalignment. Misalignment that has carried the day. Some misalignment that still carries the day. And until we move away from that misalignment, we're not going to get it right. So we need to think about aligning our institutions, incentives, and individuals. And that's sort of an important combination of knitting those facets of our civil service systems and our public motivation systems together. And then finally, and a lot of this is already on record and published articles, I want to talk about design principles that enhance alignment. And I've got 8. I may not be able to cover all of them in much detail, but certainly I know I did a document, a paper, that's people, if they want to get a hold of the paper, I'm sure can get a hold of the paper. Am I correct in that? Yeah, okay. So that's what I want to cover. Now let me go to those 3 other-oriented motivation concepts. First of all, public service motivation. And you got the definition here from an article that I and Lois Wise, a colleague at Indiana University, published in 1990 in Public Administration Review. The definition is an individual's predisposition to respond to motives grounded primarily or uniquely in public institutions and organizations. Now, I've been doing research on motivation since at least the late 1970s. One of the things I never encountered until I read that definition was the effort to articulate what in fact is different about the public sector and what we referred to when I was a graduate student as the public ethos, and how that differs from motivation elsewhere. And we did have the question, I think Ms. Eggers or someone raised the question about the public-private difference. I believe there are differences, but maybe more important than that is that we need to sort of accept the differences that are and sort of move forward designing our systems consistent with those differences. Because if we ignore the differences and say whatever is done in the private sector is right, then we're going to continue to confront this misalignment that I think has been very prominent during my career. The second concept, and I visited this concept when I first started doing this research, was the idea of altruism. And the slide defines altruism, motivation based on considerations of another's need rather than one's own. I think that's sometimes referred to as the maternal instinct or whatever, but I'm a man, I wouldn't understand that. But when I first started doing research in this area, I was interested in trying to get a handle on what altruism was and whether that applied to what we do in the public sector. Now, we can go too far with this, with saying that what we do is altruistic, but I think altruism is certainly relevant, and there's a lot of research that points to that. And then the third concept, one that again came along about the same time as this idea of public service motivation, which with all due respects, I have to give credit to my colleague Al G. Rainey, who used that term in a 1982 article in the American Review of Public Administration. I've never sort of embraced the term myself, but this notion of pro-social motivation goes back to the late 80s, early 90s, but it's the desire to have a positive impact on other people, groups, and organizations. And often when we talk about public service and why we do public service, we get into this idea that, hey, listen, I'm doing it to help a group with which I identify, I'm doing it to help my community, I'm doing it to do good for other people. So there's a sort of a pro-social component. Now, the reason I bring those three concepts together is they're related to one another. And they also have another consequence. They're related to one another in the sense that they converge around this emphasis on other orientation. Now, why is that important? Because for many years, the institutional assumptions we made about motivation in public organizations were all about self-interest and the self rather than the other. Now, my key argument, and I'm not going to go into it much later because I don't have that much time, but is that, you know, if we want to think about public institutions, we need to embrace this idea of other orientation. As long as we embrace and think that what we do is out of self-interest, and that's sort of a core principle of the way we design our civil service systems, we're going to be sadly disappointed in the results we get. And again, that's, I'm going through the details of my presentation, and I realize I sort of spill over into personal belief a lot. There's a lot of evidence about some of these things, but I also believe these things, and I sort of have difficulty separating the two, but I think it's important that we recognize that this other orientation is critical to our movement forward in designing civil service systems, motivational structures in government that work for those institutions rather than for the private sector. And again, somebody asked a question earlier about the difference between public and private motivation. I have some credentials. I spent 11 years, my first job was as assistant professor in what was called the Generic School of Administration. It's now a business school. It subsequently became a management school, but I did my public administration in a place where I was working alongside the best and the brightest who were studying the private sector. And I think we all agree, not only me, but my private colleagues, that there are differences, and we need to sort of embrace and understand those differences. Okay, so that's so much for definitions. Now, again, let me make this argument for those of you that may be going forward and redesigning and developing systems. And I wish I had this book to share with you now to put it in more black and white. the evidence that we have. But I think there are sort of three reasons why I think the research on public service motivation, altruism, pro-social motivation can be very useful as a foundation for reform. First of all, as one of our other speakers already mentioned, it's evidence-based. If you go to my website, where I keep mainly the research on public service motivation, since that original article in 1990, there are about 500 sources. The volume of research has grown exponentially. If you look at a review article we published in Public Administration Review in 2016, the curve goes up, like the space shuttle, exponentially. The other thing that's happening today, partly because of some of us calling for more experimental work, is that we have a much higher quality of research being done today than we did 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and a lot of it's experimental. Matter of fact, let me give you an example. On the way here, a political scientist at Northwestern University sent me 4 papers, all experiments on Ukraine and Russia, studying the relationship between public service motivation and corruption, suggesting that the nature of the institutions may have something to do with the attributes and the quality of the people. And so public service motivation may be important for staving that up. That's a result of experimental research using samples in Russia and Ukraine. And they mentioned, by the way, that those 2 countries are known for high levels of corruption. I didn't verify that myself, but that was in the abstract. So we've got a lot of evidence, and that evidence is getting better, and it's accelerating. The other thing we have is I think we have comprehensive evidence. Now, typically when I talk about motivation, one of the things I emphasize is what is it we're trying to motivate? The new public management sort of gave us this mindset that the only thing we're trying to motivate is high performance. I would use an American slang term here, but you wouldn't understand that. It was introduced to me by my twin brother. But the reality is that we need to motivate people to join the organization. You talked about joining and retaining people. We need to get them to do their jobs day in and day out reliably. And we also need them to engage in innovative and spontaneous behavior, maybe high performance. So they need to do lots of things. But I think the research, for instance, on public service motivation, altruism, and pro-social motivation says, hey, we've covered all those topics. We got research on all those areas. Whether it's organizational selection, or retention, or tardiness, or absenteeism, or high job performance, or whatever, we got research on that. So this body of evidence is not only growing exponentially in number and in quality, but it's also focused on a whole range of topics to help redesign our civil service systems. And we need to be focused on that. And then finally, the other component where I think this research is important is that it's coherent. Now, one point I make, and I've got on some other slides, but I think I'm going to sort of go beyond or skip over a lot of that so I can talk about the design principles briefly before I have to stop, is that this research for the first time captures the values and the symbols and the norms of the institutions in which we are embedded. I wrote an article with the late Lyman Porter, who's the person I think who created the idea of job satisfaction. So if you've heard of job satisfaction, you know about Lyman Porter's work. Lyman and I wrote an article published in the Academy Management Review in 1982. And one of the things we talked about was the fact that almost all the research is done in an industrial context. So what we know about motivation had nothing to do with what we learned from studying government. And it wasn't until the research on public service motivation came along that we pushed our colleagues in other areas, and this is the other reason why sort of the slide refers to theoretical. If you look at the research now, economists are doing research on altruism. They call it public service motivation. Social psychologists are doing research on pro-social motivation. It basically relates very closely to public service motivation. Sociologists are doing research in this area. So sort of a key idea is that this research is coherent both with respect to the institutions that are our focus and are most consequential for us, and a body of theory coming from at least 4 or 5 different disciplines, including public administration, that really, I think, sort of sheds some light on the motivational calculus, the motivational equation for people in public service. Okay, so how much time have I used? I had 20 minutes, so I'm gonna, like I said, it may.
Yes, you.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm going to skip about 3 slides here, but let me talk a little bit about aligning institutions, individuals, and incentives. One area that I've done a lot of research in is pay for performance. Now, pay for performance is the biggest fake, I'm using a Donald Trump term, fake on the sort of our intellectual integrity that ever came along. But it's a great example of the problem of misalignment. We bring people to public service, or people come to public service. Why? Because they may want to do good for their fellow citizen. They're certainly not there to line their pockets unless they're on the take. Now, I can't speak to that very directly, but maybe some of you folks may know more about that than I do. But the reality is that people come to service for noble and good reasons often. And then we say, hey, we're going to start paying you based on the job you do, the level of performance, and we're going to translate all that good you do into money. Now that's a big turnoff. It's a big misalignment of what the individual motives are and the organizational incentives. But that keeps getting imposed on the organization. Why? Because people in the legislature or elsewhere believe that that's what works. Now, I've done enough research on performance pay in the public sector to know that $1.98, every extra $1.98 cents, this is American dollars, every 2 weeks, I don't know what that translates into in Kazakh money, but it's not much, even though you got 300 or 400 to the dollar. It's like 700 of your currency. Isn't much money. And people aren't going to sort of jump through hoops for that. But the other aspect of that is it ignores the nature of our institutions. Performance pay and high salaries for senior executives makes great sense if you're running the Trump organization, or if you're running a private enterprise where you may have unlimited resources from the widgets or whatever it is you make that you sell. It doesn't work in the budget-constrained environment of public service. And we've known that. The interesting thing is we've been hoodwinked. Because when I first started doing research on performance pay, and I'd say, well, and one of the studies was published in 1985 in Academy of Management Journal, the most respected management journal, and I won an award from the Society for Human Resource Management. We got $5,000 for best article. But when we talked to people about the article, they said, well, it didn't come out right and people weren't motivated because it's government. You must not have implemented it correctly. And we repeatedly would run these experiments or run these evaluations of performance pay, and they'd say, you must have done something wrong because it works everywhere else. Well, first of all, I don't believe it works everywhere else, and we've subsequently gotten evidence since the 80s about where it doesn't work. But there's a lot of secrecy in the private sector about performance pay. It fits the institutions. Secrecy is not something that we can live with in the public sector. Transparency is sort of the coin of the realm. And certainly citizens want to know where their money is going. And if we're getting into the bureaucrat, they want to know how much that bureaucrat is getting and why. And this is a key reason why performance pay keeps failing, but it's probably the classic example of people being sold a bill of goods about a particular management practice that doesn't work, that's misaligned. It misaligns the institutions and the organizations. It misaligns the individuals and the incentives. And so it's been a failure. It's a failure fundamentally and at its core, and not simply because we're just incapable of implementing it correctly. That's a lot of baloney. Now that's baloney is probably as strong a word as I will use today. Okay. Now, let me sort of skip so the argument on the individual has to fit the organization has to fit the individual. We never talked about institutions. I think one thing that the public service motivation research has brought us, and the research on altruism and pro-social behavior, is that it said we need to think about the institutional rules. We need to think about the norms because they are relevant too. And if we ignore those, we ignore powerful sources of influence on individual behavior. And that's sort of a key point, I think, coming out of this research over a period of many years. Now, I've got 8 design principles here, and I want to sort of run through them quickly, but I will try to explain them briefly enough to get through them quickly, but also substantially enough that you'll be able to ask questions about them if they're sort of critical, or if you think that there's some bad ideas. First of all, attract high public service motivation employees. Doing so has consequences for employee performance and agency mission accomplishment. Now, we haven't translated, for instance, the Russian and Ukraine research on high public service motivation employees being less likely to be corrupt. But if that's the case, then we have a sort of we make the case for this design characteristic. That to say, we want people who are good from the perspective of their public service motivation. Think of all the people we could get into bureaucracy. People who have a high public service motivation and they're committed to their fellow citizens. People who are lazy and know that they will not be called out for their lack of performance. People who want a job for life and know that the job security system in the government organization will basically sort of save them from having to account for their behavior. The reality is that unless we pay attention to these individual characteristics, we're going to lose out. We're going to lose out on getting the best people for the organization, people who perform well, and people who behave reliably and ethically. So that's sort of, I think, an important cornerstone of the design principles. And to be honest, and I've spent a lot of time in Korea, it's my first trip to Kazakhstan, I would have these conversations with Korean colleagues. They would give people the Goshi exam. Now, if you know anything about Korea, you know that the demand to take the Goshi exam increased 1,000% between 1997, 1998, and the end of the next decade. Why? Because parents would tell the kids, we had an economic crisis here, we had high levels of unemployment, go to government, you can get that and keep that job. But do I want a lot of people who are trying to protect their job in my government organization, in my government unit? Or do I want people who are there because they want to make a difference for their society? So we need to get better at selecting in people and also excluding other people who want to enter our civil service. Now, one of the problems I had in a conversation yesterday, one of the problems of our sort of classic thinking about civil service systems is examinations for the job. I don't think examinations for the job is where we want to be. We need to go beyond examining for the job. We need to go, I might call it the character of the employee, maybe the long-term viability of their staying with government. Clearly, one of the things that happens is if we get people who don't have a strong commitment to the values and norms of the government organizations they join is that once they get some experience, they're ready to go to the private sector where they get more pay. And they'll gladly do that because that's what they're interested in. Do we want those people to begin with? Probably not. As long as we can get people who can do the job, who have other goals in their lives, including sort of serving their community, serving their country, doing a duty for their fellow citizens. Those are the people we want, but we need to find ways of honing in on those individuals. Okay. Second is supportive work environment reinforces public service motivation. In the one sort of idea that I would associate with this, and for those of you familiar with self-determination theory talks about these fundamental psychological needs. And these fundamental psychological needs are relatedness, competence, and autonomy. And what we want is we want to provide environments, and I think we can do that by emphasizing sort of the connection between our managerial activities and public service motivation. We want to create environments where people feel competent, they can work autonomously, and they are also related to the people around them, both in their unit and maybe outside the unit. So those are sort of, the second design principle is one that I think we can draw directly out of self-determination theory, and it's related to serving fundamental psychological needs. A third element, we have a lot of experimental evidence on this, is identify beneficiaries of jobs and organizational missions, creating opportunities for direct contacts between employees and beneficiaries. I translate this to two words, or at least in my book I translate this to two words. Public work. Public work is often, or work is often, and tasks are allocated to governments. Why? Because they can't be done in the private sector. And there are lots of things, whether it's policing, whether it's firefighting, whether it's national security and defense, that are unique to the government enterprise. Let's find ways of translating the significance of that work to the activities of our employees. And in doing so, we're going to retain those people are going to perform at a higher level, and they will perform more reliably. I think we already know that from the research evidence. Okay, 3 design principles related to incentives, and one of these, the first one has already been touched on, I think, by our UNDP regional representative, Mariana. Government organizations should emphasize low-powered rather than high-powered incentives. We spent a lot of time during the new public management, that era from the late 70s to the late the late 20th century, late 1900s, on trying to create high-powered incentives. High-powered incentives, as Mariana indicated, UNDP already knows they don't work very well for a variety of reasons. One is they're inconsistent with the motives of the individuals in the organization, so there's not a good fit, not a good alignment between the organizational incentive and the individual motives. The other reason they don't fit very well is because our government institutions don't generate the funds to adequately support the financial requirements of these high-powered systems. But there are lots of low-powered things, recognition or other forms of attention to good performance by employees that we can attend to, and we need to do that. Another one, and this is sort of saying do no harm. Avoid incentives that crowd out public service motivation. We should also seek to crowd in pro-social intrinsic autonomous motivation. That comes both from the social psychological research out of self-determination theory, as well as something called motivation crowding out of economics. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to have people who have a high quality public service motivation, who are altruistic, who are pro-social, and say, we're not interested in that. Let's drive that out. What we want to do is we want to reinforce that if at all possible. So we don't want to do harm with the incentives we create. We certainly don't want to crowd out the more powerful motives. And then another one, and I'm interested in hearing what people have to say about the compensation redesign, and this is based on a paper I delivered in China in December. Total compensation is the appropriate benchmark for external comparisons. We had the one example about the social policy, the social welfare program, where it's not as good in the public sector as in the private. Well, you know, maybe they need to be reconciled. Maybe we need to bring it up the level of the playing field so that the total compensation for government employees is not something that will drive them to go to the private sector to get adequate recognition for their work. I say that with having a Master of Social Work graduate in my family. My 41-year-old daughter moved from the public sector to the private because they pay her better there. But she still does the same work. But she couldn't get the recognition in the public sector. But that's pretty common. We need the other sort of side of this, the other reason I refer to total compensation, is the tendency in some jurisdictions, certainly the U.S. is one that's guilty of doing it, is that we give people compensation on the par with the private sector, and then we give them nice pensions. So they do a lot better in the government sector. The question is that what we want to do? And of course, my view is that that's inconsistent with this notion of public service motivation and service being sort of a core value, a core norm of what we do in public administration. Two additional principles, and I think they've been touched on already to some extent. Provide opportunities for newcomers to learn about organizational values and expectations for employee behavior that reflects public service values. We can't assume that everybody that comes to government already buys into the sort of the public service motives and the public service values. So we need to do some socializing. And that's through orientation programs, onboarding programs, and others. There's some great examples of onboarding programs that have been used to sort of bring people along to see the culture and the values of the public organization. And we need to broaden that sort of perspective. And then finally, and this is where I think it goes back to the title for this session, develop leaders who communicate and model public service values via organizational mission and vision. Somebody said something similar to this earlier, but as I'm writing this book, the word that keeps popping into my mind is mission. We need to be able to articulate our missions, get people excited about those missions, communicate them honestly, but get people fixated on what it is that this organization is all about and what difference it makes. And that, I think, is one of the keys to generating high quality performance, reliable performance, and continuing performance from individuals we draw to our organizations. So, conclusion. We have a critical mass of research. Let's not ignore it. I'm writing and editing a book now that's going to be published in September in honor of Paul Volcker by the University of Pennsylvania Press. And the idea is that we have a dearth of intellectual capital. That was a point represented in my emails with some of the authors. I don't buy that idea. I believe that what we need to do is read the stuff that's already out there. Somebody needs to go to that list of 500 public service motivation sources, read the research on altruism, read the research on pro-social behavior, and before you know it, you'll have plenty of intellectual capital to begin changing civil service systems. A key to civil service system, though, is aligning public institutions, individual motives, and organizational incentives. Hopefully, when I finish this book, I will be able to sort of convince you that we can do that without sort of doing somersaults or twisting like a pretzel, that this is possible. And I think it's sort of just requires some sort of simple values to be embedded in the way we think about our public service. And then finally, pursuing the principles of positions government globally to fulfill aspirations of their citizens for a better quality of life. This is certainly a point that comes out in the public passion documents which are available online that are intended in part support the Sustainable Development Goals. But I believe in that, and I think there's evidence to support it. Thanks for your attention, and I look forward to questions.
We are grateful. We are grateful to you, Professor Perry, for sharing your knowledge. Yes, you may sit, please. Thank you. As we are 40 minutes beyond the planned time, I would like to suggest to move the discussion with Professor Perry at the end of our session, where we have special time for discussions and Q&A. Now, I would like to give the next floor to Ms. Raisova, please.
Комментарий тестер, уважаемые участники, позвольте внести разнообразие и поговорить на русском языке. Тема моего доклада «Как корпоративная культура мотивирует работников организации». И весь свой доклад я хотела бы построить на своем личном опыте и на своих, мыслях, может быть, размышлениях. Да? Есть прекрасные слова Питера Друкера. Можно будет мою презентацию включить, пожалуйста, коллеги? Культура есть стратегия на завтрак. Да, я думаю, что многие из вас знакомы с этим выражением. И хотелось бы сказать, что сильнейшим мотиватором в работе сотрудников являются не только бонусы, зарплаты и какие-то социальные пакеты, но прежде всего корпоративная культура. И она может служить не только мотиватором, но и демотиватором. Как пример я могу привести свою личную историю. Лет 5 назад, работая в одном из крупных национальных холдингов, я участвовала в программе трансформации этого холдинга. И в рамках этой программы трансформации мы вместе с моими коллегами, руководством и многочисленными консультантами разрабатывали новую стратегию, новую операционную бизнес-модель, разрабатывали бизнес-процессы этой компании, очень кропотливо работали над кучей разных документов и создали какие-то прекрасные такие дорожные карты трансформации. Но по мере того, как мы внедряли эти описанные на бумаге инструменты в жизнь, мы приходили к выводу, что очень хорошо описанные вещи чаще всего оставались на бумаге. А жизнь она шла своим чередом, и поведение сотрудников и руководителей, оно подчинялось совершенно каким-то другим принципам и другим интенциям, может быть, что ли. Да? И когда мы стали изучать глубоко эту проблему, мы пришли к выводу, что надо работать с корпоративной культурой. И тогда мы стали смотреть, как диагностировать эту культуру, да, через что ее выявлять. И вот на этом слайде мы видим, что стратегия, цели, задачи и многие действия, то есть дорожные карты по имплементации многих действий, они не всегда приводят к тому результату, который нам нужен. А в большинстве случаев этот результат именно обусловлен поведением сотрудников, да, привычками, действиями, которые сотрудники обычно делают в своей жизни. И исходя из этого, вы знаете, так как я более 15 лет проработала в этом квазигосударственном секторе, у меня была возможность посмотреть на исследования, на исследования наших консультантов по стилям лидерства, именно в казахстанских организациях, да, по опросам вовлеченности наших сотрудников. И глядя на эти исследования 2007 года, да, там 2009 года, 2013, 2015, и понимая, что руководители менялись, организационные структуры менялись, стратегии менялись, но почему-то рекомендации консультантов уходить от иерархичных, бюрократичных структур, переходить на командный стиль работы, на более, на другие отношения, да, стиль этих отношений, почему-то неизменным оставались эти рекомендации. И тогда мы стали смотреть, что, наверное, надо еще продиагностировать какие-то моменты корпоративной культуры для того, чтобы понять, как менять поведение сотрудников и действительно достигать результата. И мы выбрали одну из методологий. Это методология Роберта Куина, который выделяет 4 типа корпоративных культур. Это культура семьи, да, основное, что в этой культуре это сила и личность руководителя, и люди обычно так говорят, потому что так у нас принято и потому что так сказал руководитель. Все объясняется этими словами. Следующий тип культуры – культура правил. Основное, когда люди говорят, потому что такие правила, и мы следуем этим правилам. Культура рынка, когда все ориентированы на результат, на конкурентоспособность, да, на амбиции и на соревновательность. И люди говорят, потому что мы должны достичь таких результатов. И следующий тип культуры, четвертый, это культура проекта, когда люди говорят, мы так договорились, мы хотим свободы, творчества и инноваций. И мы работаем в такой среде. Конечно же, чистых типов культуры не бывает, и культура обычно смешанная, но какой-то тип культуры всегда превалирует. Так вот, давайте так сделаем. В тех исследованиях, которые мы проводили с 16 буквально по 19 год, за 3 года, это организации с несколькими тысячами сотрудников, мы в 99% случаев выявляли следующий профиль корпоративной культуры организации. Посмотрите, из 4 типов культур, которые я вам ранее описывала, превалирует тип культуры правил. Да, вы видите. Но причем он настолько превалирует, что иногда он превращается в бюрократию. А там, где бюрократия, там куча согласований и возникает буквально размытая ответственность. Да, когда все начинают перекидывать эту ответственность друг на друга, и очень трудно найти того, кто же в конце концов отвечает за результат. Дальше мы видим, что вот то, что у нас сплошная линия, это текущий тип культуры, а пунктирная – это тот тип культуры, который сотрудники отмечали как желаемый тип. Да? И основное, наверное, в этом профиле даже не то, что превалирует культура иерархии, да, там, культура там, семьи, проекта в минимальной степени и рынка также в минимальной степени. Но вот этот разрыв между текущим и желаемыми профилями культуры. Вы видите, да, что люди очень сильно хотят уменьшить эту бюрократичность и иерархию, но при этом они очень сильно хотят уйти в тип культуры семьи. Да? Это такой патерналистский тип, когда есть очень много гарантий, очень много каких-то социальных поддержек, да, и когда все опираются на силу личности руководителя. Но и что особенно интересно, что практически, вы видите, совпадает текущий и желаемый профиль по рыночной культуре. И это к тому, что в основном мы проводили исследования в акционерных обществах. Да, даже если это квазигосударственный сектор или частный сектор. И мы видели, что сами стратегии, декларируемые, утвержденные стратегии этих организаций всегда говорили, мы ориентированы на результат. Очень амбициозные KPI, да, войти там в 30-ку лучших компаний, в 10-ку лучших там передовых компании сравняться с какими-то бенчмарками и так далее. Но при этом сами сотрудники и руководители в своих привычных способах поведения, они не стремятся достигать эти результаты. Да, то есть они не стремятся к этой конкурентоспособности. И вывод, который мы могли сделать, это то, что вот текущая культура, она одна, и есть диссонанс с желаемой культурой, но при этом есть же еще профиль целевой культуры, да, той культуры, которая поддерживает стратегию нашей организации. И если мы начнем смотреть, то KPI у нас обычно, показатели, которые ставят перед собой организации, они рыночные, да, это идти вперед, быть конкурентоспособными, достигать каких-то очень высоких результатов. Но сама культура, поведение сотрудников и руководителей, она не поддерживает эти KPI. И именно поэтому, скорее всего, очень многие наши планы, очень многие стратегии остаются декларативными иногда на бумаге. Это был вот один из наших выводов. Но что особенно было интересно, вы знаете, я стала смотреть исследования, которые проводились в России. В России проводилось очень много исследований, даже не по методике Квина, а по методике вот Бека. Практически это та же методика, только там 6 типов культуры. Вот нижние типы, вы видите, да, там, где у нас идет выживание, принадлежность и сила, это культура семьи. Да, дальше культура правил, это вот наша культура, успех это рыночная культура, согласие и синтез это культура вот проектная. И как я увидела, в 80-90% организаций российских, те, которые диагностировалась корпоративная культура, там была культура принадлежности и силы. Мы делаем так, как сказал руководитель. И мое мнение было таково, что и в наших казахстанских организациях, хотя мы для себя даже в диагностике видим, что у нас действует культура иерархии правил, но она, знаете, какая-то мимикричная такая. То есть мы говорим, да, мы действуем в рамках правил, но на самом деле правила тоже действуют в своей жизни на бумаге, а в жизни, в реальной, да, в каждодневной мы все равно руководствуемся тем, что нам сказал руководитель. Вот согласна, особенно в организациях, может быть, публичного сектора, квазигосударственного сектора и так далее. И получается так, что нам еще расти и расти к тем культурам, которые вот более верхнего уровня. Это культура рынка, да, культура успеха, согласия и синтеза. И вот основное, наверное, в этом слайде, что я хотела показать, что каждая культура, она требует своей компетенции, своего поведения от сотрудников. И если сейчас у нас вот в культуре силы мы от сотрудника требуется только там исполнительность и ответственность, то в более высоких уровнях культуры там уже требуется и какая-то состязательность, и дальше уже и инновации, и диалог там, и так далее, и так далее. Хотя очень часто мы декларируем, мы инновативные организации, да, там мы стремимся стать там, мы приветствуем творчество, креативность от сотрудников. Таким образом, мне бы хотелось сделать вывод основной, что для того, чтобы наши стратегии, наши планы всегда реализовывались, нам очень важно смотреть на то, какое поведение у наших организаций. Так как времени мало, я быстро пройдусь, да, по слайдам. И хотела бы остановиться на последнем слайде. Конечно же, можно сколько угодно увлекаться разными исследованиями, но вопрос, что делать? Все согласятся, что надо меняться, надо менять культуру. Культура, конечно, зависит от стиля лидерства. Да? Надо взращивать наших руководителей, которые будут демонстрировать не 2 стиля поведения, или авторитарный, или товарищеский, да, а 6, допустим, стилей в зависимости от ситуации, будут и наставниками, и экспертами, да, там, и ролевой моделью и так далее. Поэтому, конечно же, что мы в своих рекомендациях, когда работали с корпоративной культурой, делали, мы, конечно, разрабатывали те ценности, которые будут поддерживать стратегию организации. Да, мы диагностировали текущие ценности поведения, потом те ценности, которые нужны, и здесь очень важна и коммуникация. Это постоянно нужно визуализировать, повторять, кричать и демонстрировать, да, эти ценности. Во-вторых, конечно же, нужна критическая масса людей, которые поддерживают ценности, и есть еще критическая масса людей, которые противодействуют. И мой личный опыт показал, что всегда надо менять людей. Менять физически, коллеги. То есть, если есть люди, которые, ну, просто не то, что не хотят, но и не могут, да, поддерживать те ценности, которые нужны для стратегии, их надо методами там, аттестации, да, нетерпимости, вот, допустим, нулевой терпимости к неэтичному поведению и коррупции, да, и так далее, буквально выталкивать, вымывать из организации. А потом через найм уже новых людей, которые более склонны, да, вот как нас предыдущий спикер сказал, вот к такому просоциальному, может быть, поведению, да, как в госорганизациях требуется, то их принимать в организацию, их притягивать в организацию. И если мы вот эту критическую массу людей, противодействующих, буквально вымоем, да, из организации, и следующее, тех оставшихся людей, которые остались и которые готовы поддерживать культуру, дальше мы начинаем менять их сознание. Мы начинаем обучать, ротировать, продвигать. И здесь особенно важна система оплаты, как материальной, так и нематериальной, потому что мы должны поощрять то поведение, которое поддерживает ценность. И как HR-менеджер я всегда сталкивалась с тем, это наша болезнь. В своих HR-процессах мы часто делаем процесс ради процесса. Оплата ради системы оплаты и так далее. Но всегда исчезает вот этот момент поведения, что оплата, найм, оно всегда должно быть нацелено на то поведение, которое нужно нам в организации. Да? Или это поведение инновационное, творческое, да? Или это поведение исполнительское там, и избегание ответственности и так далее. Поэтому вот этот вот переход на какой-то уровень осмысленной, осознанной работы с поведением людей, да, изменение поведения, это, конечно же, то, я думаю, к чему мы сейчас уже в казахстанских организациях пришли, и в этом огромная роль принадлежит руководителям, потому что именно они, те ролевые модели, и те символы, может быть, да, и побудители для своих подчиненных и для всех окружающих меняться и быть другими. Ну и самое, конечно, важное, мы можем сколько угодно менять людей, нанимать очень хороших людей, но если наши структуры своими, там, как организационными структурами, своими бизнес-процессами будут очень закостенелые, то любой даже самый хороший сотрудник, он просто в этой закостенелой структуре погибнет, да, затухнет, зачахнет, поэтому очень важно работать с бизнес-процессами, самой структурой организации и так далее. Ну, это все, что я хотела сказать, я думаю, для сектора государственной службы, наверное, именно корпоративная культура также является одним из главных мотиваторов. Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Reisova. Now, please let me kindly give the floor to Mr. Nair.